In this video, I'm going to show you how I made these exact graphics using Fusion in DaVinci Resolve. I'm really excited to jump into this. I think it turned out really great. And later, I'm going to share how I can actually use that music too. So here we are in the Fusion page of DaVinci Resolve 19, and we got a lot to go over. This video is going to assume that you know the basics of Fusion. I have a lot of videos on the basics of Fusion. If you're just starting out and you need some help, we'll click that right up there. Okay? So pretty much we have this broken up into a couple different parts. This part over here are the letters, and we have the lights and the 3D. We have the background, particles, and then the post effects. Let's start with some simpler stuff. Anytime we make something in Fusion, generally have like one line of nodes here. And this is kind of like the main line. That's like the main composition where everything goes. So all of the major elements enter the comp along this line in merge nodes. Okay, so we're just going to walk through the flow of this line, and every time we get to a merge node, we're just going to go up here and explore what the heck is going on. So let's start at the very beginning. I'll just load these into the left viewer so we can see what's going on. This is just a good old black background. See? 1920 by 800. It's just a widescreen background. Then we have some vast noise. This is just kind of some dark blue clouds. I don't even know if you can see it on YouTube, but just kind of some dark purplish blue clouds put over our black background. And now we have a slightly blue background. Then down here, we have a couple of merges. These are actually kind of just copies of the same thing. And what these are all making are these energy cloud things that are sort of running away from the camera. It's like an energy tunnel thing. And how we make that is we start with some fast noise. We also have some other fast noise, which we're turning just to pink clouds. And then I used an effect called dent, which just kind of dents the image and does this sort of circular distortion on it. Next, we have a matte control. And what this does is it takes an ellipse mask, which is just a circle with a soft border, and uses that as a mask. And we're just kind of cutting this out and masking these pink clouds with that circle mask. The reason I'm doing it here instead of here at the fast noise is because I want this to be dented already. If I were to mask just the fast noise, then we would have a different look. It would be masking these clouds and then running the dent, which might look similar, but that's the way I did it. And so this fast noise actually that we talked about earlier, that's going into a displace node. And what we're doing is using this displace node to take this ring and kind of make it wavy. All right, that's what a displace node does, is it makes it wavy. And we're driving those waves with that fast noise. So wherever it's white, it's pushing it more. Wherever it's black, it's not pushing it as much. So we have these waves that we're applying to this ring, okay? Then we're just making this one ring. And then here, what we're doing is we're taking this ring and then we're delaying it 12 frames with time speed. So time speed is a great node where you can just take something and kind of move it down in time within a node. And so now if we were to look at both of these, we'd have the ring, and then about half a second later, it's just a copy of it. So it just kind of copies itself and offsets it in time. The other thing I did is this ellipse right here. If I go over to my spline, take a look at this, I animated the scale of that circle, but then I selected both of these keyframes in the spline panel, right-clicked, and went to set loop, loop. And what that'll do is when it's done playing through the entire animation that I've keyframed, it's just going to restart it and play it over and over again forever, which is really convenient if you don't want to animate something forever. So this is just set to loop. And so we have both of these rings just going down like this in a loop. And then we're kind of doing the same thing. We're taking the whole thing and we're slowing it down a couple different times. And we're doing a color corrector to it. So just changing the colors. This one's a little bit more red. This one's a little bit more purple. We're transforming this and we're just kind of offsetting a bunch of, basically just offsetting copies of this one ring multiple times. And that's what this merge and this merge and this merge is. It's just offsetting those rings and putting them over each other. Each of these rings is applied with a screen. So when something goes over something else, it brightens where the two layers meet instead of just kind of replacing it. And then we have an ellipse mask, which just kind of gets rid of that middle part there. So it's just kind of darker in the middle. And so we're just taking this one ring and duplicating it and offsetting it and color correcting it and everything. It gives us this really cool effect of this kind of never ending tunnel. And it's just that one ring just looped over and over again, offset in time. So that's why we have this really cool motion background. Then we're transforming it. We're just scaling it up so that we only see sort of the middle of it. I'm adding a little bit of lens blur to it just to take the edge off. And then I'm adding some particles. That's what all this is right here. So let's take a look at that. These are the lollipops that are flying into the distance. Okay. So candy flying away from the camera. This you can do a lot of different ways, but what I ended up doing was taking an image of a lollipop, just like this, and running it into an emitter. So this is a particle emitter. And let's just push up the number of lollipops here first so we can actually see what's going on. And so as time goes on, this is just making more lollipops in 3D. All right. So this is just putting a bunch of little 2D sprites in the world and shooting them into the distance. And we're emitting that in this shape, in a ring shape. And so what I did was I just got a background and did another ellipse with just a border on it and put that into the emitter. And this emitter uses that shape to emit whatever particles we want. I set up the particles to emit a certain amount of particles per frame and to shoot them out into the distance. You can do that by changing the velocity and the angle. I also set up the rotation and the spin. I put 360 degrees for the variance, which means that each lollipop is going to start at a different rotation. And then with the spin, it means it's going to rotate a different speed. So those are all kind of just being shot out into the distance. And then I took the number of lollipops way, way down because we just need a few of these. And so those are being shot out behind the camera. So then I have that 3D particle emitter, which I'm putting into a world with a 3D camera. And I'm making sure that the camera is behind where the lollipops start. So the lollipops don't just appear when we see them. They just kind of come from behind the camera. And so that's kind of what we get are just these lollipops flying away from the camera. And then we did some color correction just to kind of make these a little more purple. And then I did a really tricky thing is I wanted a little bit of interactive lighting on this, but without making these actually 3D meshes, you would have to do a lot of work to make the lighting work. But instead of doing that, I just added a drop shadow and I just made it a pink drop shadow and put it up top to make it look like a little rim light. So this is kind of the difference there. So that adds like a little rim light to this, even though it's just a pink drop shadow. But you know, if it's nice and subtle, sort of looks like a rim light. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, let's take this. We're going to merge it over. So now we have our background with the lollipops flying away from the camera. And this is a perfect time to start worrying about our logo and our text and all of that. And that comes in on this merge. It's actually pretty simple. After this, we just have a glow and some grain, and then we render it out. But we'll get back to that here in a minute. So as we're diving deep into these nodes, you're probably like, wait a minute, you can't use that music on your video. You can't use 21 Pilots, like actual music on your video. Because I mean, the graphic we're making is cool. You know what I'm saying? That's cool. But the music like really sets it off. You don't believe me? Try it without the music. Which brings me to our wonderful sponsor of this video, Licked Music. Licked is an amazing licensing service for content creators that lets you use mainstream music and it's affordable. You guys know we don't do a whole lot of sponsors on this channel, but these guys are so cool. And it's really easy. All you have to do is sign up, find a track you want, download the license, and when you upload your project to YouTube, just add attribution to your video, and Licked clears any copyright claims and they kind of take care of you. That's why this video that you're watching has not been demonetized. That's cool, right? And so you can actually get tracks from bands you've actually heard of. Check this out. They got 21 Pilots, they got The Offspring, one of my favorites, Linkin Park, Green Day, and tons of other tracks. They even got Bieber. They even got Bieber, guys. So if you want to use actual like mainstream music in your videos on YouTube, this is the best way to do it. And you can get a smoking deal on a subscription right now. All you have to do is click right there or the link in the description. Okay, back to the nerdery. So what's going into this merge? All this stuff. Now this is quite a bit of stuff. So let's follow this up. This is all from a 3D render. So here is just the render in 3D. And when I say 3D render, I mean it's the render 3D node in Fusion. It's not from something like Blender or something else. This is all within the same software. This is all within Fusion. And we have a lot going on here. So let's just start with this. This looks really crazy and confusing, but honestly, this is just the same thing duplicated a whole bunch of times. It's pretty much the exact same thing. I'm just doing it for every single piece of every letter. So like this part of the A is animated separately from this D, which is separated from this part of the A. All of those are separate pieces, okay? So each piece is right here. So this is a piece, this is a piece, this is a piece. And so you can see all the pieces we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pieces just in the top word, the first word here. And then the bottom word, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces. So let's zoom in on one of them and I'll show you kind of what's going on. Each one of these starts with a shape. And so this is the C shape. For the letter, this is just a 2D shape. It's within the shape system of Fusion. So that is the native vector system inside of Fusion. How did I get all of these shapes? Well, here's the answer. Here within Affinity Designer, which if you don't know is a very, very good alternative to something like Adobe Illustrator. It's a vector art program. And so I essentially traced these letters and made a vector version of this logo. Once you have the vector art for whatever logo or text you're using, then you can bring that into Fusion. So I saved this out as a SVG. So that's a scalable vector graphic. I'll just make a new Fusion project here so we can kind of talk about this. How you import the SVG is you go up to Fusion, import SVG, select your SVG and hit open. And what that will do is give you a group. If you double click the group, you can open it up and look at this. It has all of the art drawn as masks, which is really cool. So you can use masks here in Fusion using that vector art. But in order to make these 3D, we actually need them to be part of the shape system, which is different than the mask system. So in order to do that, we just need to select all of these nodes from inside of the group, Control C, can just delete the group now, Control V. So these are outside of the group. And then I'm going to run a script. Now, I believe with version 19 and later, you can only run scripts in the studio version, which is too bad. But if you do have the studio version, you can go to scripts. And there is a script that you can download if you just Google it called KA Shape Converter. And it tells you how to install it and all of that stuff. But once you hit that, then it rebuilds all of this art out of shapes. So all of these purple nodes are the shapes that it made. And I can get rid of this now. And now if we look at the S render, we have the Suicide Squad here, but it's in shapes. Whew. Let's go back to the other project now. And then once you have a shape node, you can actually extrude it in 3D space. I'll just kind of copy and paste this and take this over here so I can show you. So we'll just take this and put in an extrude 3D. And if I push up the extrusion depth, we can see that it just takes that shape and extrudes it and makes it into a 3D mesh. Isn't that so cool? Oh, it's so powerful. And you can even bevel it using the bevel depth and bevel width. And now we have this nice looking 3D C. And that's pretty much what I did for all the letters. In fact, let's just drag another copy out here. We put that through an extrude 3D. So we're just extruding that in 3D space. And then I wanted to add a little bit of a texture to it. See how it's just completely smooth and beautiful. So what I did is I just got a grunge texture. This is just a texture from our motion graphics starter pack, which you can get for free right here. Has a collection of those textures. And then I brought that into a bump map node. And what that does is it lets you use that texture as bumps on a 3D surface in the 3D space here. And I plugged this bump map node into the bump map input of this blend material. So there are several different kinds of 3D materials inside of Fusion. I honestly don't even know the difference between a lot of them. One thing I do know is that Blend lets you use a bump map. And so we can have this kind of bumpy surface on a 3D material. The other thing I did was take some fast noise and just made some kind of purple and white clouds and put that into the color. So we have this material that looks like this kind of bumpy, almost like a dinosaur egg looking thing. But in context here, when we put this on a letter, looks like it's kind of got this rough texture here. Now, something I did was I got this UV map 3D. And so what this does is it actually lets you map the texture to the 3D object. And that side of Fusion isn't like the best. It can do quite a bit of stuff, but you can't like, if you're familiar with 3D, you can't like unwrap and do UVs properly inside of Fusion, but you can project a texture on like from a plane. You can also do it from a cube, and you could fit this cube to the size of the letter, and that will give you various different results. And I played around with the different ways of mapping this, and it looks best by just mapping it with a plane. Even though the edges here are stretched, we don't see the edges very much, and it sort of just looks like brushed metal a little bit, and so it just kind of happens to work out. So each of the letters is extruded and texturized like this. And what I did was I put all of this stuff into a group, and I just ran each of these letter shapes through an instance of that group. And so here we can see we have all of the groups. And so that will do the same thing for the C and the I and the D and the E. It's just doing the same treatment to each letter. The reason we have to do it this way is because we want to animate each letter separately. And so we have all these instances, and I made these instances just in case I wanted to change the texture here. So I could go into my master group here, and I could take this fast noise and change the color, if I want to make it red, and that's going to make every single one of these red. So I don't have to go through and adjust every single one of them. That's the beauty of instances. So each piece of the letters is extruded and texturized using these instances, and each one of those has a 3D transform. So there's just a 3D transform for each of these. So this is the C. And so each of these is animating the letter to come in place. And those are just keyframed. And pretty much what I did was I just duplicated one of these because they all have basically the same animation of kind of turning and locking into place. And then I just kind of tweaked each one and kind of moved it off the side. And I was afraid it would be a lot of work, but it actually wasn't too bad. It just took a few minutes to kind of set that up. And so really all of this stuff, everything here and here, it's really all the same thing. It's a shape with an extrude, and then it textures it, and then it animates it. And that's just for each letter. So there's a lot of letters. That's why there's a lot of nodes. Anyways, so that all gets merged together. Let's just look at this merge, and we'll kind of see what's going on here. So we have all of the letters flying into place like this. And so really for each letter, what I did was I started with them in place like this, set a keyframe, backed up a little bit, and then just kind of pulled them back. That's pretty much how that works. So there's the letters. And yeah, without the lighting and everything on it, it does sort of look like dinosaur eggs. It's kind of funny. But once you get into the lighting and everything, it starts to look really cool. This is just the 3D animated letters right here. Then we're taking those into Emerge 3D. So Emerge 3D, anytime you add it to Emerge 3D, it's like adding it to a 3D world. So we have a 3D world with all of our letters. It's like a group, sort of. And then we bring it into a new group here. And this is all of the lighting. So I added quite a bit of lights here. I probably even could have gotten away with less lights. But let's take a look at what we're doing. I'll just go up here and uncheck Show Controls real quick so we can see what's going on. Here we have the lighting. And there are a couple main lights here. There are a couple directional lights. These are the kind of main lights here. And so I'll just turn these off for now. I'll go ahead and just turn all of these off so we can just see them all at once. So I started with an underlight. So just kind of lighting this from below. Then we have a kicker light. So a light that's kind of behind everything and shining back towards us. Then we have a pink kicker light and a blue kicker light. And that kind of gives us that sort of neon feeling. And from there, we have the rims of the letters looking pretty cool, but we need to light the front of the letters. So we had a series of other lights here, a lot of point lights, which is just a light that's sitting here in 3D space. It's like a ball of light that's invisible, and it just lights whatever is kind of around it. So we have quite a few of those that I just kind of put here and there to light certain things up, so that we have a blue point light here, blue point light there, various other little point lights just to make things a little bit shiny, add a little bit more light there. And that's what kind of lights the front, is just a whole bunch of little different colored point lights. So now this is looking pretty sweet. We have our lit up letters, and we have these letters kind of coming in to the light. The thing that was a little bit challenging is when they're coming forward like that, the point lights are actually back here. And so they aren't being lit yet. So I had to add a couple more point lights here in the foreground to make sure that they're lit up somewhat as they fly in. And you'll notice sort of if you look really carefully, as they come in, the point lights actually start taking effect. And I actually didn't mind that effect, even though it was sort of accidental. It sort of looks like they're shining at the end, kind of lights them up. But yeah, it was sort of accidental, but a happy accident, right? So now we have this looking good. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention the art on the front of this cue. There's a lot of ways that you could probably do this, but I did just the cheap hack way, which was on the cue, which is down here. I ended up just getting an image and taking away the black with a luma keyer, color correcting a little bit, putting it on a 3D image plane, and then just putting that image plane in 3D right on top of that cue. So if you zoom in, you'd see that this is actually just like a little bit off the surface, just a little bit lifted off the surface, but it's so close that it doesn't matter. It looks like it's just painted on. And that was just easier than trying to map a texture and change materials and all of that stuff. So I just basically just put a card right on top of that cue. It's a cheap way to do it, but super easy, works like a charm. Okay, so we have our text lit up with our different lights, and that's looking pretty good. This merge 3D doesn't really need to be there. And then we're bringing that into the render 3D. So the render 3D is where it actually makes it look good and turns it into an image. It's not just thinking about it in 3D space. So this is an actual rendered image that we can put over 2D stuff. So we had our background and our lens blur and our lollipops, and we just put that render right over the lollipops like that, and we're almost done. Then we have a glow on top of that. That just adds a little bit of spice. Then a little bit of film grain on top of that, which just kind of brings everything together, makes it feel cohesive. Probably hard to see on YouTube, but there's the film grain that we just added on top of that. And that's pretty much it. That's the title. This was so much fun. I had a blast, and I know I went through this pretty quick, so if you have any questions, leave them down below. Licked also gives you access to unlimited stock music, and you just select the amount of mainstream track credits that you need when you sign up. All you have to do is click right here or the link in the description below. Oh baby, such a good deal. Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. You sweet friend, you're so sweet. You're just sweet. You're a sweetie. You're sweet as a lollipop flying through a dimensional portal.